Hello, my name is Kent Philpott. This is part 4 in our little video series for YouTube on the church. What is the church? And we've been talking about how it is that churches can be dangerous, can be toxic. Last time we were talking about, inauthentic recruitment processes, how people get into the church. And another part of it, of course, would be how people are motivated, or how do you get people to do things. Sometimes it's fear of rejection or fear of shunning. And whether it happens to be, let's say, moral lapses or doctrinal variation, all kinds of things. People will be motivated to toe the line. The Christian life is one of growing up into the fullness of Christ. It's a lifelong process, and we are far from perfect people. When you look at the church in the New Testament, you find that there were problems. You got a bunch of people together that all of a sudden have jumped from being totally in the world and all of those processes to be in a community of faith, and it's not a simple thing. And, we use the metaphor of the new birth. Jesus said, you must be born again. Well, when you cut figuring that out, that, we're growing up into Christ. I remember that I was an infant, and I caused trouble. I was a rugrat. I was a toddler. I was a little kid, and then I was an adolescent, a rebellious teenager, all the way up through. It's a process of growing. Whenever you see somebody, it's always just a snapshot in time. That's not how they may be. And I was always glad that people didn't give up on me early on, because, you never know how a person may turn out. They may turn out okay, may turn out not so good. Well, in any case, there's a growing up process, and that growing up process is sometimes messy, sometimes difficult, and there's the fears that, I might be excluded from this. And so sometimes those kind of churches that have highly forms of motivation make people hide, and they're afraid, and so they sort of wear the mask and not real, and so on. So there's the ways people are motivated, primarily through guilt, fear, shame, processes that aren't genuine to the heart of Christianity. And then, of course, the retention. Again, fear comes in. Well, if you're not part of us, and after all, we control salvation, well, you're going to go to hell if you're not part of our church. And it gets so complicated that I don't want to unnecessarily bore you with some of the material that I suppose I could conjure up here and lay on you. I don't want to do that, but the retention. Someone said it ought to be as easy to leave a church as rolling off a log, and that's got to be true. If people don't like Miller Avenue Church, they're fine to go someplace else. I always try to tell them, hey, you're welcome to come back, but the Lord bless you as you go on. The whole thing is to continue to follow Jesus and serve Him and serve other people. That's the message. But anyway, a church is not always a safe place. That there are all kinds of problems. People have misconceptions about what a church is so much. I had them. I was rather startled to go to a business meeting at the First Baptist Church of Fairfield, California, where I was converted, and I saw the deacons arguing with the pastor, and I saw the pastor get upset and was, I thought, what in the world is this? These guys are supposed to be saints. We call them saints. How come they don't act really wonderful all the time? How come I see too much personality? How come I see too much temper? How come I see some anger at times? Well, these are just people. They're not saints. I mean, they're saints in the sense that we're all saints, called of God, set apart for the gospel and so on. But perfect we're not. By no means. By no means. We're never going to be perfect this side of heaven. We're always growing up into the stature of the fullness of Christ. That's just how it is. And as I said, it can be a messy process. So we are patient with each other, forgiving of each other, forbearing one another, and encouraging one another, not rejecting one another. And that's one of the things of a toxic church is the rejections that go on, toe the mark in terms of behavior and belief and following the leadership and so on. You can end up in some very unpleasant circumstances. That's what we call toxicity, and it does exist in almost every kind of church. And then I cannot monitor the behavior of all the people who come to our church. Far from it. Sometimes I wish that I could, but I can't, and I've had some very unfortunate situations with some of the things that people in our congregation have done. I don't want to go into the details, but I've had some really rough times when people have, without my knowing it, through emails, through telephone calls and private conversations before church and after church and so on, who have intended to really disrupt and cause trouble. And we're spreading stuff. Anybody can come into a church and say, yeah, I believe. We don't oftentimes know any different. But anyway, church is kind of a dangerous place. Sometimes it's a minefield. There's that song I heard in the country western program. It said, the kind of sort of the chorus went, God is great, beer is good, but people are crazy. And that's not going to be my statement of faith, but there's a little bit of truth to that idea. So you never know what you've got in a church. There's no right church. Jesus is the one who's right. And we are followers of Jesus, and we stumble through it as best we can. Now, in the very next program, I'm going to lay out what I consider to be the marks of a genuine church. In fact, I'm going to make a statement. Where you see these things, there is the church. When you don't see these things, then that is not a church. And I know I'm going to be a little bit controversial, but anyway, I'm going to speak my mind, my experience after 4 decades of pastoring churches. All right, so long.